Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 13 through chapter 10, verse 20. I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. But I say that wisdom is better than might, though the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heard. The words of the wise heard in quiet are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an error proceeding from a ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in low place. I have seen slaves on horses, and princes walking on the ground like slaves. Who digs a pit will fall into it, and a servant will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt, and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength, but wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him. The toil of a fool wearies him, and he does not know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter.
So we're continuing our series in Ecclesiastes, which it's been teaching us each week that life is hevel. Hevel means breath, so if you imagine your breath on a cold day. So life is a breath in the sense of it's fleeting. It is so short. And so we've looked a number of weeks at how we actually live a lot more joy-filled lives and live more loving lives when we wake up with a deep conviction that like today could very well be my last day or the last day of somebody that I love, because we're here today, we're gone tomorrow. So it's a breath in that sense, and also it's a breath in the sense of it's just we can't control it. You know, you can't control as you look at a breath on a cold day. We also can't control so much of life, how other people respond, how other people treat us. And so what Ecclesiastes does for us is surprisingly, it's one of those happy books in the Bible. It teaches us how to live lives of joy and gratitude and how to have wisdom in a life that's a breath, that's hevel. And today this section deals with the question of if life is so short and so much of it is outside of my control, what should I choose to do with my days? What should I choose to do? It's this question of choice. And this question of choice got me thinking about a series of conversations I've been listening to by a professor named Dr. Alan Noble. He teaches English at university. And he says that in his office hours with students, this theme of choice keeps coming up. And in at least two senses. One in the sense of he notices a recurring theme of powerlessness or felt powerlessness in his students. So in the sense of they say things like, I know phone addiction's bad, but I can't stop reaching for my phone. Or I know that porn use is bad, but I can't even imagine a world where that's no longer an issue for me or for this person that I'm in a relationship with. And even more than that, powerlessness in the sense of with news flooding their pockets every minute, it's like, even if I am able to make a choice, what good is it going to do? So powerlessness when it comes to choice, but then also choice paralysis, right? Especially college age, heading out into the wide world. It's like this deep fear of there are so many choices in front of me. What if I make the wrong choice, right? And ruin potential for a good life. And the good news in this passage is what God tells us is, first, you're not powerless. When it comes to choice, you're not powerless. You can make choices, and choices that matter, because I've given you this agency as an image bearer. So you can make choices that matter. And two, as you think about choice paralysis, like what if I make the wrong decision, right, and blow up my life? What this passage shows us is that a worthwhile life, it's less about never making the wrong choice, but instead it's about making a particular choice each day over the course of years, which is really freeing. A worthwhile life, it's not about never making a wrong choice, but about making a particular choice, which we have an opportunity to do each day over the course of years. And so that's how we're going to lead into this section. Is first we're going to ask, what is this particular choice that we can make that is a life well lived in the kingdom of God? And as you were hearing the scripture reading, it may have felt all over the place, right? All these series of Proverbs. And anytime a passage in the Bible feels confusing, it's helpful to look at context, what comes before and after. And when we look at the end of chapter 9, okay, how does he lead into all these Proverbs in chapter 10? And what we see is there's this story of a poor wise man. There's a tiny city, few people in it. This great king and army comes and besieges the city. And you have this poor wise man who, through wisdom, delivers the city, emphasizing wisdom's power. And then he emphasizes that point in verse 16, saying, but I say wisdom is better than might. And then verse 18, wisdom is better than weapons of war. So wisdom is so powerful, so powerful. And not just powerful, but a powerful force for good. This poor wise man delivers his people through wisdom. So that's the point of the poor wise man story. And then the rest of chapter 9 and then all of chapter 10 gives a series of contrasts between wisdom and folly. You can choose wisdom, you can choose folly. You can choose wisdom, you can choose folly. And just for some context, it's worth highlighting that wisdom in the Bible, it's about far more than being smart versus not smart, but it's about living with a deep closeness to God that flows out into greater discernment in the many complexities of life. That's biblical wisdom. And so we bring all this together, right? Wisdom is so powerful, such a force for good. And then we're given all these proverbs where it says you can choose wisdom or choose folly. The point is, what choice should you make each day? It's to prize wisdom with everything that you have, to seek it with everything that you have, and then to apply it in the many day-to-day decisions. And it's fascinating when you think about this. So King Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 3, he's told by God, you can ask me for anything. And Solomon's answer, paraphrased, is, I'm in a role far above my pay grade. Give me wisdom. And it says, God is pleased with his request. He says, you didn't ask for wealth or for a long life, but wisdom to lead your people. So I'm going to give you wisdom. And I was thinking about this, like if I could ask for anything, I get one ask, anything. It's like telekinesis. I think as a parent of young children, the ability to move things with my mind, I can think of no greater superpower. Either that or the ability to eat as many donuts as I want with no negative consequence. Or the kinds of things that I would ask for. But what Solomon asked for is wisdom. And as you think about your own life, like what is it that you most want to have? Or put another way, if God were to answer yes to most of your prayer requests, would it result mainly in your life becoming just a little bit more comfortable? Or would it result in you becoming a person who's wise and therefore is able to do great good for other people? Parents, what do you pray for most for your kids? Right? It's natural and fine to pray for things like success and for them to avoid suffering and certainly to know and be known by Jesus. Or like, do you pray for wisdom for your children? Because it's one of the most powerful forces for good in the world. I think you get this on a basic level. I was thinking about when I was in seminary, one of the things I appreciated most about my time in seminary was the professors I had. And there was one professor in particular, this old man, he was so wise. And there were a number of times where I'd meet with him for lunch or just talk with him after class. And there were a couple moments in particular where I was dealing with some really complicated issues in the church and in relationships I had. And, like those situations where it's like there's no right answer and it just feels like a lose-lose no matter what, but you do need to make a decision in terms of what you're going to do. And the beam of clarity this man was able to provide that then waterfalled into, they didn't just make my life better, but it waterfalled for good into the relationships I was in because they were affected by these decisions that I had to make. Like it was so good. And so what's the choice all of us should make in the day today? It's to choose wisdom, to want wisdom, and then to apply it in the day today. And so with that in mind, let's now look at chapter 10 and look at, okay, so what does applying wisdom look like and how does it lead to good for others? And as you could tell, there are so many proverbs in here. And so we have two choices, right? We can either go through every single proverb, spending about 30 seconds on each one, and we all feel a little disoriented at the end. Or we can cover like what are the broad themes that the author is going over, and so that's what we're going to do for our remaining time. Is just what are the broad buckets that are being covered with respect to wisdom in chapter 10. And the first thing we'll look at is wisdom means prioritizing character and leadership. Prioritizing character and leadership. When you look at the words that are used, so the words that are used most often in chapter 10 are wisdom and folly. Second to that is the word for ruler or king. So you know that this idea of leadership is really important in this chapter. And specifically prizing character in leaders, whether it's leaders you're following or in your own influence with other people. And we see this in a number of places. One place we see it is in verse 5 and 6. There's an evil I've seen under the sun. And then verse 6, folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. Meaning there's an upside downness to how we tend to choose leaders. So we tend to elect those or to follow those who are fools, people who don't have good character. But the rich are in a low place. And don't hear this as the rich, like, oh, the oppressive rich. But in the context of wisdom literature, this is speaking of those who work with such faithfulness and diligence that wealth tends to come to them. Right? So generally speaking, we put people in leadership who shouldn't be, while those who actually have good character often aren't put in leadership. And then see verse 16 and 17, continuing this theme of character and leaders. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. There's an application there for those of you who tend to procrastinate by playing instead of working. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility, meaning those who have been trained to lead well, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. So it's this idea of, right, verse 16, woe to you, O land, when your princes feast in the morning. So self-indulgent leaders tend to inflict suffering upon those who are under their influence, whereas those who are people of good character lead to happiness, right? Happiness. Happy are you, O land, when your princes feast at the proper time. So the point here being is character and leaders, it matters so much. And more than skill and competence, I think about a man, his name's Mark McGeever. A couple of you have met him. So he's the founder of Times 12, the church planting network we're in. And as I think about him, he is a very skilled individual, just when it comes to organization, strategy, leadership. But his greatest contribution to the network has been the man that he is behind the scenes. Like, he's one of those people, I've known him now for a decade, and I've seen him in moments of conflict and stress. And he's one of those people you're like, I'm waiting to see the evil side of you, and yet it doesn't come out because, yes, he's beset by sin, but like, he's just one of those people where he truly is about the good of the people that he's leading. And he's had many opportunities to fend for himself rather than giving something to somebody else. And he is so humble, so kind, so true to his word. And the ripple effect it's had on me and all the planters in the network is stratospheric. And I contrast that to other organizations that I'm well acquainted with who are founded by people of great business acumen or incredible rhetorical ability, but yet who have poor character, and the effect that that's had on the organization downstream. You all can probably think of organizations yourself, right? Because character in leaders, it matters. In fact, it's the most important thing in a leader. And so as we think about growing in wisdom, just think about how can you prioritize character in leadership? It can be prioritizing character in people you follow, which can include politicians that you support. Polling data over the last 15 years or so, it suggests that Christians across traditions, so evangelical Protestants, mainline Protestants, Roman Catholics, tend to downplay or are willing to downplay personal immorality if it means this individual getting elected will advance their political outcomes, the political outcomes that they want. And it's easy to like think of people groups in your mind, right? But just like, this is a temptation for all of us to say like, yeah, character matters, but as soon as it's not expedient, to be like, character matters. And so at minimum here, as we think about politicians we support, the Bible nowhere says you must only vote for a Christian and never a non-Christian, right? There are plenty of unbelievers who can lead very well. At the same time, we should, like, shrugging at a candidate's character, just like, it doesn't really matter what their personal morality is like. Like, what matters is how they get things done. That's a category that the Bible doesn't have, because who a leader is affects everything, right? From their circle to the nation that they lead. Think about the voices that you listen to on social media and in podcasts. Right? It's easy to be drawn toward those with a charisma, those who have a certain way with words. It's like it's fun to listen to them, and that may be fine. But questions that we should ask are like, what's their character like? Like, begin to pay attention to how do they talk about other people? Is it in a biting way or an honoring way? Or is there a sense of humility about them? Because the voices that we listen to shape who we become. So we should prize character in the people we follow and support, and also we should prioritize character in our own leadership. So as you think about, and everybody is a leader in the sense of each of you here influences people. So in your career, ask questions like, do I pray more for success in my career or to be a person of character? In your job, do you want to be known for more somebody who's like competent and sharp and skilled while those things matter? Or do you want to be known for being a person of character? Somebody who's true to your word. When you say you'll do something, you do it. Somebody who uses kind speech when you're speaking of people who aren't in the room. Somebody who, when there's an annoying coworker and everybody knows who that coworker is, right, rather than viewing them as just in the way or as an opportunity to get ahead, maybe you help them. In your parenting, what can this look like? It can look like just remembering that probably the greatest gift you can give your children isn't your career success, and it's not getting your child into the right school curriculum or the right extracurricular activities, but being a person of character as your child sees you with your hand in Christ, and as your child experiences you, like giving them a gentle, ongoing presence that communicates, I'm so glad you exist, will do so much more for your child than any kind of skill or competence that you can bring. So wisdom, it prioritizes skill in leaders, those we follow, and how we think about what we want in our own influence. It's one of the best things we can give to people is our character. Second, what does wisdom look like? It looks like accepting limits. Verse 8 and 9, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. So, there's some language here indicating it's written in a particular time and place. But the point of these verses is it's talking about the cause and effect of things, specifically how they don't always work how we expect them to. So like digging a pit, splitting logs doesn't normally inflict harm on you, but sometimes it does. And so the point here is to accept limits, accept your limits, meaning don't be so confident in your sovereignty and your ability to guarantee successful outcomes that you're not surprised when events and people don't respond as they should. So accepting limits here is a key aspect of wisdom. And as we think about accepting limits, there are a number of ways that we can think about this. One is accepting the limits of wisdom itself. And we see this in the framing of the poor wise man story. So this wise man, it says he's not remembered and he's despised. He saved the city. And the response of people is to despise him and not remember him. And so this is so important because acting with wisdom doesn't always mean you'll be thanked for it or rewarded for it. So you may prioritize character in your job, and then you may not be promoted as quickly as your peers with worse character. You may not even be thanked for making the harder decision because you prioritized good character. You may make really wise, godly decisions, and your life can still be really hard. And so the key here is part of wisdom is knowing, right, there's a meta component is remembering the limits of wisdom. So utility in wisdom shouldn't always be the primary grid we're using to decide whether or not we make a decision, right? But instead are we following the Lord's word as we make these decisions? We remember the wisdom of limits itself. We remember the limits and accept the limits of other people. Right? So often we get unduly upset with people because we're expecting them to be Jesus. Right? So we look to a friend to fill a hole of loneliness or meaning we have. And then when they frustrate us or bore us or let us down, we distance ourselves from them. We get so upset when a parent or a spouse or a child behaves the same way today as they did yesterday. Of course they did. They're limited. We look to so many people to act as if they're the unlimited one and then get angry or just disillusioned when they inevitably fail us. And so we love well, right, when we stop placing these burdens on other people to be unlimited. And then accepting the limits of ourselves. Often burnout happens not because the work itself is so hard or life itself is so hard, even though work and life are hard, but often it's more underneath that. It's placing a burden on ourselves to be Jesus and to carry the weight of outcomes in a way that he never asks us to bear. I think maybe one key area that a lot of us can grow in is this, in terms of accepting our own limits, it requires becoming okay with disappointing people. Because often we spiral when we're just trying to be all things to all people. And I heard a leader of a large organization sharing how for a number of years he was so afraid to disappoint his staff. So he keeps saying yes to me. Yes, I'll help you with this. Yes, I'll take this meeting with you. And he kept getting home late in the evening to his family. And then he had a health scare, which just woke him up to I need to prioritize what's important. But he said what was vital for beginning to prioritize the people who mattered most was being okay with disappointing people. And so what it ended up, so he began, instead of like working up until the last possible second, then inevitably arriving home later than he should, is he just set the cutoff in his day way earlier. But what it would lead to is he'd be in the middle of a conversation, and you have to say, hey, I know that if we had 15 more minutes, we could probably put a bow on this thing, but my family's waiting for me, so I'm just gonna have to put this down. I gotta go. And learning to be okay with disappointing people. Right? But when we're living to not disappoint, then we're acting as if we're unlimited, right? So we need to be okay with accepting the limits of ourselves, which means other people may be disappointed in you, and that's okay. Right? So we prioritize character and our influence, our leadership, and those we follow. We accept limits. Number 3, what does wisdom look like? Right? What can we remember? These are all choices. We can choose character. We can choose to accept limits. What's the third choice we can make? We can choose calm and gracious speech. There's a lot of proverbs in here about words. See verse 4. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place. That means don't get all huffy and storm out of the room. For calmness will lay great offenses to rest. And then in verse 12, the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor. Another translation for that is the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious. They give life to other people. So calmness, so somebody comes at you aggressively with anger, calmness lays great offenses to rest. And then the words of the wise, rather than getting all huffy, defensive, fighting fire with fire, are gracious. So calm and gracious speech. How many relationships and group dynamics would be healthier if, as the temperature rose, everybody just used calm and gracious speech? And this is a choice. We can't control how other people use their words. We can control our own speech. I saw this, I've seen this a number of times. One time in particular I was in a team meeting. This was not me and John Campbell, by the way. This was a different team meeting, and the leader was getting heated and started to direct some intense language at a few of the people. And one of the individuals who it would have been really and this person's wise, and it would have been no one would have blamed him if he got defensive and fought back and retaliated. Instead, what is he did? He was like, hey guys, let's take a moment here. And then he looked at the leader and he said, hey, he was like, I could be wrong. It seems like you feel as if you're not being heard right now, or maybe not listened to, or like there's something bothering you. If you're open to it, would you just mind sharing so we can hear a little bit more what's going on? And it brought everything down in a way that was so much more productive and healthy. So as you think about, one of the best things you can do for the people in your lives is to maintain, this doesn't mean be a doormat, but to have calm and gracious speech, especially as the temperature is rising. Some concrete ways to do this, and of course these are all context dependent, but one is the temperature's starting to rise, right? Or somebody starts to get aggressive towards you. I think our natural fight or flight response is either to, just leave, or we jump to how can I control this person, right? They're not acting in a way that I want, so I need to manage them. When we can't control how they're behaving. However, looking at wisdom, what we can control is managing ourselves and praying for it. Lord, help me in this moment to be calm and gracious. It can mean taking a moment to pause and clarify intent, right? Often we misread so they say something and we assume, oh, that's because you're after me. So even just pausing, and this could be especially through text, email, or in person too, just take a moment, somebody says something that rubs you the wrong way, and you can just ask a question to the effect of did you mean for that to come across as rude? Was that meant to be helpful or hurtful? right? And then often they didn't, so they get to clarify what they meant. Or maybe they did mean for it to be rude, but then it gives even them a chance to be like, oh, wait, I did, but maybe that wasn't appropriate. Or you can just take a moment to say, like, hey, this is hard, right? It takes a lot of practice. But even if you start to feel yourself getting to a place where you're not going to respond well, you just, Kelsey and I do this with each other a lot. Be like, hey, I think I'm in a place right now where I'm about to say something I don't actually mean. Can we come back to this in a little bit? Parents, if the anger of a ruler rises against you, sometimes your child is the angry ruler, right, rising against you. I have yet to have found a time where I didn't remain calm and it made things better. And so parents, we do have a choice. And it is one of the best things we can do for our children, no matter how riled up things get, is to remain calm and gracious and to remove ourselves from the situation if and when we can't, which happens to me all the time. Right, so we prize character in leadership. We accept limits. And see how accepting limits in other people helps us remain calm and gracious toward them? We have calm and gracious speech. Number 4, we maintain what's important. Toward the end, he says, through sloth, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. So in context, roofs in Israel were flat, and there was a lime covering on the roofs that required constant maintenance, because otherwise it would crack and decay, and then water would come through and the roof would collapse. So he's saying that wisdom means you don't let decay win the day. You maintain what's important. And when you think about maintenance work, often we neglect it because it doesn't feel exciting, right? So whether you're the homeowner maintaining your HVAC filters or cleaning the gutter, or you're a coder, right, updating the documentation of code, right? This isn't exciting work, but it's really important. And so the wise maintains what's most important. You think about what are the most important things in your life. It might be your marriage. It might be your connection with your kids. It involves relationships with people in the church. And most of all, it's maintaining our proximity to Jesus. Like, how do we let decay our proximity to Jesus? Because we don't just drift into closeness with him. And so how I've been needing to start my days is, so I start my day by I don't look at my phone, and I go outside and I take a walk. And as I take this walk, I look for God in creation. So I look at a cool tree, right? Or often the sun's coming up, and I think about his artistic skill. I often hear birds, and I think about Jesus saying, you know, in my Father's kingdom, you don't actually need to worry. You don't need to be uptight about today. And then I return home and I hear from him in Scripture. I respond with some prayer. And I do this each morning not because I'm so godly and spiritual, but because I'm not. And like, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to be wise. I'm not going to have great character. I'm not going to have calm and gracious speech. I'm not going to accept the limits of my children and coworkers and people in the church. But by spending time with Jesus and enjoying him and experiencing him enjoying me, I've become more like him. And I'm increasingly convinced that what people need most from me is not my skill or competence, but they need someone it's just obvious that he's been with Jesus. In Acts chapter 4, that's what the religious leaders say as they hear the apostles. They say, these men have been with Jesus. And that's what people most need from you, someone who's been with Jesus. And he's the most important relationship we can maintain, proximity to him. And it really is all about Jesus. That's the final and beginning aspect of wisdom. It's about Jesus. As we read this passage in the context of the Bible, which we should always read every passage in the context of the Bible, who does the poor wise man who saved a city and was despised make you think of? More than Jesus. Right? You and I may not be besieged by a literal king and army. We're actually besieged by things far worse. Our own sin and the sin of others, death, alienation from God. And just like this city couldn't save itself, we cannot fix our worst problems. And the good news of the gospel is that God doesn't leave us alone to get wise on our own, to figure it out on our own, but he comes close to you through a poor, wise man named Jesus. And in the act of saving you and I, he was despised. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3, speaking of Jesus, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. As one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised and we esteemed him not. To the world, and honestly maybe for you, like even if you count yourself a Christian, entrusting your entire life to a guy who was hung on a cross 2,000 years ago can often seem so foolish. And it's through his cross and his resurrection that he gives you life to the full with him and in the kingdom of God. And so, what choice should you make each day? It's to draw close to Jesus, to choose Jesus every day, remembering that he has first chosen you. And then as you choose him, first as your Savior, but then second, as you draw near to him each day, he helps you make the wise choice to do good for other people in your life. We looked at a lot today. And so to bring us back, just go back through, right? A worthwhile life is one that makes a particular choice each day. It's going to be choosing Jesus, who then gives you wisdom. And as you think about wisdom, do you prize it? And then within wisdom, character in your influence or those you follow, accepting limits in yourself or in other people, calm and gracious speech, maintaining what's important. Maybe just choose one of those things. We can't walk out of here and do it all. Just ask the Lord here as we close. Just ask him for what's the main thing you're wanting me to focus on with you just this afternoon and tomorrow morning. And enjoy him as he does that with you.